They looked at her, a black woman, simple, no designer clothes, no assistant accompanying her, and assumed she was just another unfamiliar guest who didn't belong. What they didn't know was that this woman was the one who had built every brick, named every door of that hotel. Monica Harris, a single mother who had worked her way up from a night shift receptionist, was now the CEO of a top hotel chain. But in the very space she had created with all her heart and determination, she was denied entry, simply because her appearance didn't match the preconceived notion of someone who's in charge. And then, with just one phone call, one steady step, one direct glance, the entire system had to regret. Not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't need to. This isn't just a story about power being overlooked. This is a lesson about presence, perseverance, and the strength of a woman who doesn't need permission to belong. Monica Harris, a 48-year-old black single mother, stood before the revolving glass door. The light reflected on her face, revealing the determined eyes of a woman who had passed through many doors that others said weren't meant for her. She wasn't accompanied by an entourage, didn't have a high-end leather suitcase, no expensive watch or sparkling jewelry. Just a light blue shirt that was neatly ironed, an old fabric bag slung over her shoulder, and a pair of flat shoes that had crossed countless airports and large conference halls. She had just wrapped up 3 days of packed meetings in Minneapolis, where she attended sessions about expanding Harris & Company's new branch. Technically, she didn't need to be at tomorrow's board meeting at Oak Ridge Grand, one of the properties she had laid the foundation for over 6 years ago. But at the last minute, Monica decided to visit in person. Not to show off, not to be in front of the media, just to reconnect with the atmosphere of a place she once considered her child in her career. She walked through the glass door, her shoulders slightly trembling because the air in the lobby was colder than she had imagined. Beneath the crystal chandelier, the space exuded a rigid luxury. Monica looked around. No one recognized her. And perhaps that was when everything began. At the reception desk, a young woman was tapping lightly on the keyboard, her other hand biting the end of a pen, unsure whether to check the system or answer a customer first. She wore a small name tag, Kayla Matthews, night shift employee. Her blonde hair curled in waves, her long and shiny nails tapping in rhythm on the keyboard, like a beat of her habitual indifference. Monica approached, smiled gently, politely, but without lowering herself. "Hello. I'd like to check in. My name is Monica Harris." Her voice was low, soft, each word clear and confident. No need to emphasize, but not allowing herself to be underestimated either. Kayla glanced quickly at the screen, her fingers scrolling through a few tabs before halting. Her face changed, the thin smile disappearing. "Sorry, I don't see that name in the reservation system." "It's all right," Monica replied, maintaining her calm demeanor. "I didn't make a reservation. But according to the hotel's policy, there is always a suite kept aside for the owner, and I am that person." Kayla looked up. For a moment, her face showed confusion, followed by a forced smile. Are you the owner of the hotel?" "That's right." Monica nodded slightly, neither arrogant nor easily dismissed. Kayla hesitated. Then, as per protocol, she spoke in a tone that was both polite and cautious. "Sorry, but the hotel is fully booked at the moment. We only accept guests with reservations." Her voice was as cold as the marble countertop she was standing behind. No further questions, no positive curiosity. At that moment, the air felt thick. Monica stood still. She didn't react. She simply looked behind the counter where a gleaming brass plaque was mounted. Oak Ridge Grand, a Harris property. Her name. Not just on paper, but on these very walls. She didn't ask to be honored. She didn't demand a red carpet or champagne greeting. She only wanted a peaceful night, to sleep, to catch her breath before another long day of meetings. But instead, she received doubt, a silent but sharp judgment that sliced through the air. You don't belong here. Monica still didn't move from her spot, even as her hands began to feel cold, even as old memories started to resurface, even as the instincts of a mother who had endured so much began to warn her. This wouldn't be simple. But she didn't leave. Not tonight. Not when she was standing in the very place she had bled and cried to build. And that was the moment when she began to rewrite the story. Not with words, but with her undeniable presence. And Monica stood there, as if she were the only thing unchanged in a world spinning rapidly due to prejudice. I am Monica Harris, she repeated, slowly, but without the need for emphasis. This is my hotel. Her words weren't a demand, they were a truth. Kayla Matthews, the night shift receptionist who had only been working at Oak Ridge Grand for 4 months, hesitated. Her lips curved slightly, as if she had just heard a joke. But instead of laughing, she spoke with a tone that was half disbelief, half sarcasm. You're the owner? The owner of this hotel? Her gaze shifted instantly, from neutral to wary, then quickly turned to disdain. Kayla lifted her chin slightly, her eyes scanning over Monica's shoulder. No bodyguards, no luxury luggage, no platinum membership cards resting on the counter. Monica stood there alone, with her worn flat shoes, a faded canvas bag slung over her shoulder, and an air of calm that made those who once thought themselves more important uncomfortable. Are you sure? Kayla asked again, this time unable to hide her doubt. Monica didn't respond. She simply tilted her head, gazing at the gleaming brass plaque behind the counter. Oak Ridge Grand, a Harris property. Her name was there, etched in brass, in money, in the perseverance of a mother who once had to wash uniforms by hand in a rundown apartment while her daughter was in kindergarten. But her name, to Kayla, seemed meaningless. A heavy silence stretched between them. Neither of them moved. Kayla glanced back at the screen, then turned toward the desk phone. Her hand reached for the receiver. Her voice was casual, but the implication was clear. Excuse me, I'll call the night manager. Go ahead, Monica replied, her hand still resting calmly at her side, her back straight. No irritation, no expression. But the atmosphere in the lobby had clearly changed. From a corner near the fireplace, a middle-aged couple dressed in golf attire glanced over. A young man wearing headphones, pretending to work on his laptop, stopped typing. A doorman subtly twisted his wrist, as if preparing to act. No one spoke a word, but they all understood. Something was happening. Moments later, a slender man appeared from the side door next to the reception desk. His tie was slightly askew, holding a clipboard. A name tag crossed over his chest. Neil Dawson, Assistant Night Manager. Good evening, is there a problem? Neil asked, trying to keep his tone pleasant but unable to mask his unease when he saw Monica. Kayla didn't let Monica respond. She turned to Neil and said louder than necessary. She says she's the owner of the hotel. Neil paused for a beat. His eyes quickly shifted from Kayla to Monica. There was something in his gaze, a momentary confusion. Then it quickly shifted into a forced smile. Sorry, your name is Monica Harris, she said for the third time. This time, her voice was no longer soft. It wasn't loud, but it had weight. The certainty of someone who had spent a lifetime being questioned about her identity and still stood firm. Neil adjusted his glasses, his fingers quickly flipping through a stack of papers. A quiet tension spread like mist across the lobby. I'm not making any claims, Monica stated clearly. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm here to check in. My name is on every quarterly financial report, on all executive documents. I am the owner, and I know there is always a suite reserved for me in every Harrison Company hotel." Neil pursed his lips. "Yes, we'll verify that right away. Please wait a moment." Monica didn't react. She stood still, not tapping her foot, not checking her watch, not pulling out her phone as others would to record. She didn't need to prove anything through a camera. She had already proven it with her entire life, and that was what unsettled Kayla the most. She thought someone with power would demand, would shout, would pull out business cards, a summons, or at least call a lawyer. But Monica just stood there, as if she were the very root of this building, and everyone else were mere branches growing temporarily. Then Monica turned her head, her gaze stopping on the two security guards who were pretending to check the elevator. She knew they had been called because of the suspicious appearance of a black woman with no clear identity. Their presence, though not directly threatening, was a silent message. "We're watching you." And that's when Monica understood. Tonight's rejection wasn't just about a room. It was a declaration from a system that had always silently told her, "You don't belong here." But what they didn't know was that when a single mother who had once been kicked out of a hotel for being mistaken for a maid returned as the CEO, she was no longer here to ask for permission. She was here to reclaim the space she had created on her own. And though Monica stood straight, calm like a tree unbending before the wind, she knew exactly what was happening. Neil Dawson, with a clipboard tucked under his arm and his tie slightly askew, did not come alone. Behind him were two men in black suits, security badges pinned to their chests, discreet earpieces in place. One moved to stand by the elevator entrance, the other slowly made his way closer to the bar, less than 10 steps from Monica's position. None of them said a word. But Monica understood. This was not about ensuring safety, as they would write in their report. This was a barrier of looks and suspicion, a silent perimeter built solely by one thing: her presence. And this time, it wasn't happening in a rented office in Texas. It wasn't a small bank branch in Missouri. It wasn't a cafe where she had once been asked, "Are you here to clean up?" This time, it was at Oak Ridge Grand, where she had personally signed the design blueprints, chosen each chandelier, and brought her young daughter to cut the ribbon at the grand opening in the dead of winter. And now they were treating her as a threat. Neil forced a reluctant smile, trying to steer the atmosphere toward the professional, but his voice came out dry, like old fax paper. "Sorry for the inconvenience, Miss Harris. We just need to quickly verify the information, as this is the first time I'm meeting you in person." "It's fine," Monica replied, her voice unchanged. "Take as long as you need. I'll wait here." Wait. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she knew the weight of her waiting. It was what made everyone in the lobby feel uncomfortable, what made every pleasantry feel hollow, and what made every glance carry an undercurrent of unease. Monica didn't move. She stood there, her right hand loosely holding the strap of her canvas bag, her left arm resting straight down by her side. Her eyes swept around the lobby. She noted every detail: the gray velvet bench slightly off-center, the coffee table with a small scratch from last year's move, the silk lily vase tilted the wrong way under the lighting. None of these things should have escaped her notice, and none of them knew that she was the one who had written the interior layout guidelines for the Oak Ridge chain. She noticed a group of tourists whispering in the corner by the tea room. A Korean business couple walked into the lobby but stopped when they sensed the unusual tension in the air. A bellman stepped back into a corner, and Kayla, the receptionist, was quietly staring at her phone under the counter, her fingers swiping across the screen with urgency. Perhaps she was Googling the name Monica Harris. Maybe she was searching for photos, background information, or some speech video. But Monica knew, in Kayla's mind, a question was echoing that many others had wondered before, but never dared to voice. Why doesn't this woman look like a CEO? And that was the coldest breeze. With her dark brown skin, her simple updo, her outdated but clean office attire, Monica didn't match the image society had taught people like Kayla about powerful people. They should be men, white, with salt and pepper hair, Swiss watches, and voices that rang like the bells of a bank. Monica had none of those things. She only had one thing they couldn't see, true power. And in that asymmetry she became the suspect. Neil returned after a few minutes, holding the clipboard like a shield. But Monica had seen the tension in the smallest of his gestures. His left hand clenched tighter than usual, his eyes darting to the right before he spoke. "Ms. Harris, we're continuing to confirm with the Central Operations Office. It should not take long." "Of course." Monica nodded slightly, without a hint of stress. "The sooner the better. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. Everything should be ready." Her voice wasn't loud, but it tightened the air in the lobby. A clear confirmation. She was not just a casual guest. She was someone who would sit at the head of the table tomorrow. But the security guards still stood there, still keeping their eyes on her, still unmoving. And Monica understood. Sometimes people don't really need to know who you are to respect you. They just need you to look like someone who deserves respect. But she didn't care about looking like. She was here to become the truth they couldn't deny. And in the very moment when the entire hotel lobby seemed to be holding its breath waiting for verification, Monica gently pulled her phone from her jacket pocket, swiped the screen, and held it up to her ear. No unnecessary movements, no urgency in her voice, no searching glances for support. She dialed a single number. No need to save the name, she knew it by heart. It was the direct line to Lauren James, the Midwest Regional Operations Manager for the Harris & Cobra hotel chain, someone who had stood by her through 3 rounds of restructuring, and who knew very well, if Monica Harris called at this hour, it was no small matter. "Lauren." Monica's voice was low and steady, like an underground stream that had been forced down for years, waiting for a crack to release it. "I'm at Oak Ridge Grand Des Moines. I've been denied a room at the hotel I own. Handle it now." No further complaints, no recounting of details, just 3 lines. Then she hung up. Total, 26 seconds. Everything after that became unnervingly quiet. Not because no one was speaking, but because everyone began listening. The sound of a female housekeeping employee stopping in the hallway. The scraping of a chair in the lounge area slowed. The clicking of Kayla's keyboard under the reception desk. Now no longer indifferent, but filled with confusion. Monica didn't pull out her phone to take pictures like most would. No live stream, no accusations, no status updates. She simply stood there, like a landmark. Kayla glanced at the screen in front of her once more, then lowered her head, secretly checking her phone under the desk. She was trying to find the truth, or hoping that nothing serious was happening. Her eyes flicked to Google, typing the phrase, "Monica Harris and Company." And just a moment later, the image appeared. A black woman in a charcoal gray suit standing among the executive team on the opening day of Oak Ridge Grand. The photo was taken in this very lobby, right under the crystal chandelier above Kayla's head. She froze, but Monica didn't look at her. She was looking at the large glass doors, where streetlights reflected in fragmented circles on the marble floor. Like scattered fragments of memories from hundreds of times she had to prove she had the right to step into a space. Not because she was asking to enter, but because people always thought she didn't belong there. Neil returned, holding a file folder, beads of sweat starting to form on his forehead despite the lobby not being warm. But Monica still didn't look at him. She took a step back, not to retreat, but to lean against the marble column behind her. A weight full of declaration. No one rushed forward. Even the two security guards started fumbling with their radios without a signal coming through, because they knew the silent game had ended. And Monica, the single mother who once had to fall asleep in a break room during a night shift to catch 30 minutes of sleep before picking up her daughter from daycare, was now standing in the building named after her, being treated as a stranger. The pain didn't lie in being denied a room. It was in the fact that she had grown accustomed to it. Kayla was breathing rapidly. She was so flustered she didn't even realize she had been biting her nails. The glossy gel polish she had applied at the start of her shift was now chipped. On her phone screen were articles about Monica Harris, the first woman of color to own a multi-state luxury hotel chain. From night shift receptionist to million-dollar CEO, single mother turns adversity into an empire. She couldn't finish reading them. Her hands started to shake. And in the center of all the gazes, Monica still stood as she had, motionless, silent. No need to display anger, for her silence was the loudest accusation. That 26-second phone call didn't just alert the operations office. It shook the very system of beliefs about who the owner is, who the guest is, and who is truly stepping through the threshold of the old world they thought was safe. She stood still by the marble column, like a mark that could not be erased from a place where her name was once etched. Under the light spilling from the crystal chandelier above the lobby ceiling, Monica's shadow stretched across the gray stone floor, silent, undecided, but not easy to overlook. In the luxurious space she had once designed, down to the edges of the baseboards, everyday sounds suddenly became unfamiliar. The rolling of luggage sounded louder, the tapping on keyboards felt like collisions, and even the breathing, slower, more hurried, as if everyone was trying not to make themselves too visible. Monica didn't turn her head, but she could feel the gazes bouncing back toward her, not out of respect, but out of confused suspicion. At the corner near the glass doors, a middle-aged couple in golf shirts from Brookside Country Club turned to whisper, their glances sliding over Monica as if trying to figure out who she was. They didn't ask, but their expressions were clear. There's no way someone like her could be. At the reception desk, Kayla Matthews, the one who had just denied Monica, pretended to stare intently at the screen, her fingers tapping on the keys as if checking the reservation list. But Monica could read the rhythm like a flawed piece of music. Staggering, imprecise, uneven. And while Kayla thought she was still in control, her eyes kept darting down to the desk below. Monica didn't need to look to know. She was Googling. She knew the process too well. The first furrowed brow, then the sudden surprise, followed by wide eyes and finally the long blink, as if trying to erase an image already stamped into her mind. The image of the black woman standing before her, actually being the owner of the hotel. And like ink splashing into water, Kayla's expression started to spread into panic. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her fingers slowed on the keyboard. Her back no longer straightened. Her face slowly bowed down, her eyes avoiding, not out of respect but out of shame. Monica had seen that expression many times before. From the waitress who once scolded her for sitting at a reserved table. From the bank clerk who rejected her loan application simply for lacking proper financial history. even though her pay stubs were clearer than anyone else's. It was the face of late realization, when people realized that what they thought was obvious was actually wrong. But what exhausted Monica the most wasn't the mistake. It was the mind-numbing repetition of it. How many years had it been? How many times had she walked into a space and been immediately scrutinized, judged, categorized? She had lost count of how many times people looked her up and down, then pointed toward the emergency exit. The staff area is out back. Even when she was the one paying the salaries of everyone here, they still looked at her as if she were an intruder. And Kayla? That girl wasn't necessarily malicious. Monica knew that. But she was a product of a system that never taught people that power could have a face like Monica's. A black woman, a single mother, wearing a non-designer shirt, carrying a worn canvas bag, and standing tall as if the whole room were a part of her body. Monica tilted her head, her gaze brushing over Kayla just as the girl released her hand from the keyboard. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything fell into silence. Not a comfortable silence, but a silence of awareness, of awakening, and of shame. Kayla turned away, as if caught in a bad act, and Monica understood. No one truly thinks they are discriminating until the truth stands right before them, wearing a light blue shirt and saying, "I am the one who built this place." She exhaled lightly, not a sigh, but a release of pressure, as if every breath was a way of clearing the fog in the lobby that the silence had clouded. All that she had endured, from the age of 19, bringing her daughter to work because she couldn't afford daycare, to the nights spent signing books by the kitchen light. None of that was visible under the luxurious lights here, but they were the roots of the truth. She belonged here, even if everyone else forgot that fact. And in Kayla's evasive glance, in Neil's rigid stance behind the counter, Monica suddenly felt the past return, unbidden, without a call. It came back in the silence, a silence that people like her had long been accustomed to. She saw herself at 25, holding her young daughter, Layla, on her hip, standing in front of an Italian restaurant in St. Paul. She wore a white shirt, old trousers, and her hair hastily tied in a bun. They told her, "You can't carry your child while working." She had to explain 3 times that she was a guest. They didn't believe her. Finally, the manager leaned down and said, in a tone that was polite but as firm as steel, "We're sorry, but this place isn't suitable for your circumstances." She left without saying a word. But that night, sitting beside Layla in their rundown apartment by the train tracks, the light spilling through the dusty window, she silently promised, "You'll grow up in a place where I won't have to explain that I belong." That memory, thought long past, now appeared more vivid than ever, because what was happening at Oak Ridge Grand tonight felt far too similar to the years she thought she had left behind. She had worked as a night shift receptionist, starting at 11 p.m., ending at 7 a.m. Then she'd switch into a white t-shirt, rush to accounting classes at a community college 6 blocks away. On the bus, she'd catch 20 minutes of sleep, her head drooping against the cold glass. By noon, she'd be home, just enough time for a bowl of noodles and a quick diaper change for Layla before collapsing for 3 hours. Then she'd get up, ready for the next shift. She had been called Sweetie, Girl, Darlin' in the elevator by well-dressed male guests. No one ever asked her name. No one thought she understood the numbers they were discussing on the phone. She'd heard them talk about investments, mergers, IPOs, and silently memorized every term. And now, as Monica stood in the very hotel named after her, watching employees fumble, bow their heads, avoid eye contact, she wasn't angry. But she was tired. Tired of the repetition. Tired of having to remind others that she was the one who built these walls, not the one who needed to be guided through them. Neil checked his watch absent-mindedly, a reflex of someone who knew he was being judged. Kayla, now sitting still, her hands placed beneath the desk as if by not moving, the truth couldn't keep growing. Monica gently closed her eyes, just for a few seconds. She saw herself again on graduation night, standing on stage in a borrowed dress that cost $18. Layla, then 8 years old, sat in the front row, waving and grinning. "Mom's the prettiest one in class." No one else clapped. No professional cameras, just the two of them, and a moment enough to make Monica believe every sacrifice was worth it. She remembered the nights Layla would have an asthma attack during her shift. Monica would rush back in the middle of her break, take her to the emergency room, and then return to work with red eyes. She had once clocked in at 3:47 a.m., shivering from the cold, but still smiling because she knew that her paycheck would be enough to buy Layla a new pair of sneakers. And now, when Monica had moved far from those years, when her net worth had hit 8 figures, when she was the only woman of color in the region owning over 12 luxury hotel properties, there were still people who looked at her as though she was a stranger. That truth no longer hurt her as it once did. It just made her sad. Sad for girls like Kayla, born into a world where everything can be learned from a phone, where global connections are made with a few taps, yet still not taught a fundamental lesson. That power has no color. That honor is not in clothes. That the presence of a black woman in the center of a hotel lobby doesn't need to be verified to be valid. Monica opened her eyes. A cold breeze swept in from the front door as a guest entered, but she stood tall, as if she were the pillar of the building that others called corporate culture. And within her the promise she made long ago resurfaced, not just for Layla, but for everyone who had ever been forced to prove they didn't belong. And then, just as the tension in the lobby seemed to stretch to its breaking point, a ting sound echoed. The western elevator door opened, and the golden light reflected off the polished brown leather shoes of the man who stepped out first. Brent Caldwell, vice president of the Midwest region, stepped forward, holding a clipboard, his gray vest still wrinkled down the back from sitting in the car for too long. Right behind him was Carlos Mejia, the operations director, a short but quick-moving man with a face that looked almost pale. Neither of them looked around, stopped, or greeted anyone. Their eyes were fixed straight on Monica, as if they had just seen a broken circuit in the center of the system. "Miss Harris," Brent called, almost breathless but still keeping the rhythm of a man who had handled shareholder crises in airports. "Apologies, sincere apologies. There's been a serious misunderstanding." Carlos immediately interjected, his voice stumbling as if he had just gone through a mental breakdown. "Suite 1501 has been cleared. The room service staff is checking it one last time. The driver will pick you up tomorrow morning as scheduled. We've also informed the entire operations team. This was a system error. It does not represent how we operate." Monica didn't nod right away. She looked at both men, one of whom had attended the grand opening with her, the other who had once received a scholarship funded by a community program she had created. She knew them, and they knew her. What was making them panic wasn't the wrong room. It was because they knew full well that they should never have made such a mistake with her. "We just flew in from Kansas City," Brent added, his eyes still not meeting Monica's. "When I received the call from Lauren, I immediately canceled the internal meeting." Monica remained silent. This silence, this time, didn't need to be loud to carry weight. It made the entire lobby seem to hold its breath. Kayla, sitting below the reception desk, had her head bowed, her hands clutching her shirt, as if she were self-flagellating. Why didn't I ask more questions? Why did I see, but not truly see? Carlos took another step forward, trying to turn the tablet toward Monica like a gesture of compensation. The booking for Suite 1501 has been confirmed again. We've sent a signal to adjust the whole system. The security staff has also been instructed to stand down. Brent flipped through his clipboard. You'll have 2 room keys, espresso, and a fruit tray as usual, which will be sent up at 6:45 a.m. We've also contacted the internal audit team, and, we've scheduled a meeting with the front desk department tonight. Monica gave a small nod, just enough to indicate I've heard, but not I've overlooked it. Then her gaze slowly drifted to the right, where Kayla was still keeping her head down. Monica didn't frown. She didn't glare. But that look was enough for the person opposite her to feel one thing. She would not forget. Not because of resentment, but because of the awareness that needed to be remembered and corrected. Carlos cleared his throat, about to speak, but Monica raised one finger, not in anger, but as a sign that any explanation right now was redundant. She turned to Brent. Am I checked in yet? Brent immediately checked the clipboard, flipped a page, and nodded. Just completed. The room keycards are being printed. The incident report will be sent to you within 10 minutes. Good, Monica replied, her gaze still not lowering. And the rest? Brent understood immediately. We are issuing a company-wide notice requiring retraining of the guest identification process and behavioral conduct. All Oak Ridge Grand staff will be placed in a re-evaluation program, overseen by the regional HR department. Monica tilted her head slightly. You didn't send me a draft to approve, right? Carlos quickly intervened. Number. It's an action plan. We don't want to turn this into a presentation. We want it to be a turning point. The answer made Monica pause for a moment. A long silence passed. The air in the lobby seemed to slow its breathing. Then she spoke, softly but clearly. You will talk to her. Brent blinked. Kayla? Yes, of course, with an HR representative present. I will also talk to her, Monica added. Not now. After I've rested. Carlos nodded, like someone who had just dodged a blow to the chest. But they all knew that conversation would not be like any training session they had ever conducted. And in the distance, behind the reception desk, Kayla Matthews still sat, not daring to look up. Because she knew, for the first time in her life, she had truly seen power, and it was nothing like the image she had been taught. And as Monica stepped into Suite 1501, all the eyes behind the elevator door immediately disappeared, leaving her alone, in the space that her own hands had designed, dreamed about, and fought for, a space she could finally call hers. The room was so quiet that she could hear the sound of her shoes tapping on the thick cream-colored carpet, each step echoing like a reminder of just how far she had come. The room had a faint scent of lemon, not too strong, just enough to evoke the sophistication that Monica had argued fiercely with 3 different suppliers to achieve. It wasn't a scent found in any hotel amenity list, but for her, it was the scent of being acknowledged. The scent of survival after countless sleepless nights only a single mother could truly understand. On the walnut desk placed by the window, the espresso tray was already prepared. 3 pods neatly arranged, a porcelain cup set on a white plate, and a small spoon placed next to a packet of brown sugar. For others, this might be just a luxury convenience, but for Monica, it was a symbol of the days when she couldn't afford instant coffee, when she had to reuse tea bags twice. She slowly walked past the sitting area, where the gray velvet sofa had been chosen by her one January morning, while Layla was still feverish at home. Monica clearly remembered that night. She had sketched the floor plan for this suite on a napkin, soaked in orange juice while sitting by her sick child's bedside. Under the yellow light of the emergency room, she calculated the wall space for artwork while stroking her unconscious daughter's forehead. She never sent that sketch to the architect. She kept it, because it was living proof that even during the most exhausting moments of motherhood, she was still building the future. On the table near the window, an already printed thank you card was placed askew. It had a slanted script written in silver ink. "Thank you for staying at Oak Ridge Grand. We cherish your presence." No name, no signature, no indication that the writer knew who she was. A careless card, mass-produced, soulless, and perhaps that hurt more than the rejection at the front desk. Monica picked it up, studied it for a few seconds, then set it back down. She sat on the chair, her hand gently brushing the armrest. The velvet material was cold, soft, but heavy, like how she felt right now, tired, but still resilient. Outside the window, the city of Des Moines at night still breathed through the streetlights and the sound of wind stretching between the buildings. A world that didn't know, or didn't want to know, what had just happened in the lobby of a hotel named after a woman who used to fold clothes for rent to support her child. And then Monica looked at herself in the large mirror next to the minibar. Reflected in her eyes was not the image of a CEO, not a symbol, not a title, but a woman who had carved her name into history with calloused hands and an immeasurable patience. She didn't build the hotel just to make a profit. She built it to prove that being a single mother was not a weakness, but a foundation stronger than any college degree. Every wall in this room had a reason to exist. Every color, every furniture choice, from the wood material to the stitching on the curtains, reflected one single principle she had set for the entire system. Luxury should never take away kindness. And tonight, that system had betrayed that very principle. Monica stood up, walking toward the bed, the white sheets, the two large pillows, the amber-orange bedside lamp. Everything was perfect, but she didn't feel relaxed. Not because the room lacked amenities, but because it had been tainted by the misguided gazes just moments earlier. This space, once a symbol of what she had achieved, now made her remember why she started. Not to rest, but to open the door. She didn't need a bedroom. She needed a place where those who had once been looked down upon could walk in with their heads held high and not have to prove anything. And that's why she was still here. Not to be served, but to check if the heart of this place still beat in the rhythm she had sown from the very first day. And just as the tension in the lobby seemed to reach its breaking point, a ting sound rang out. The western elevator doors opened, and the golden light reflected off the polished brown leather shoes of the man stepping out first. Brent Caldwell, vice president of the Midwest region, stepped forward, clipboard in hand, his gray vest still creased down the back from sitting in the car for too long. Right behind him was Carlos Mejia, the operations director, a short but quick-moving man with an almost pale face. Neither of them looked around, stopped, or greeted anyone. Their eyes were fixed straight on Monica, as if they had just seen a broken circuit in the center of the system. "Ms. Harris," Brent called, almost breathless but still maintaining the rhythm of a man who had handled shareholder crises at airports. "Apologies, sincere apologies. There's been a serious misunderstanding." Carlos immediately cut in, his voice faltering as if he had just undergone a mental breakdown. "Suite 1501 has been cleared. The room service staff is checking it one last time. The driver will pick you up tomorrow morning as scheduled. We've also informed the entire operations team. This was a system error. It does not reflect how we operate. Monica didn't nod right away. She looked at both men, one of whom had attended the grand opening with her, the other who had once received a scholarship funded by a community program she had created. She knew them, and they knew her. What was making them panic wasn't the wrong room. It was because they knew full well that they should never have made such a mistake with her. "We just flew in from Kansas City," Brent added, still not looking Monica in the eye. "When I received the call from Lauren, I immediately canceled the internal meeting." Monica remained silent. This silence, this time, didn't need to be loud to carry weight. It made the entire lobby seem to hold its breath. Kayla, sitting below the reception desk, had her head bowed, her hands clutching her shirt, as if she were self-flagellating. Why didn't I ask more questions? Why did I see, but not truly see? Carlos took another step forward, trying to turn the tablet toward Monica like a gesture of compensation. "The booking for Suite 1501 has been confirmed again. We've sent a signal to adjust the whole system. The security staff has also been instructed to stand down." Brent flipped through his clipboard. "You'll have 2 room keys, espresso, and a fruit tray as usual, which will be sent up at 6:45 a.m. We've also contacted the internal audit team, and, we've scheduled a meeting with the front desk department tonight." Monica gave a small nod, just enough to indicate, "I've heard, but not I've overlooked it." Then her gaze slowly drifted to the right, where Kayla was still keeping her head down. Monica didn't frown, she didn't glare. But that look was enough for the person opposite her to feel one thing she would not forget. Not because of resentment, but because of the awareness that needed to be remembered and corrected. Carlos cleared his throat, about to speak, but Monica raised one finger. Not in anger, but as a sign that any explanation right now was redundant. She turned to Brent. "Am I checked in yet?" Brent immediately checked the clipboard, flipped a page, and nodded. "Just completed. The room keycards are being printed. The incident report will be sent to you within 10 minutes. "Good," Monica replied, her gaze still not lowering. "And the rest?" Brent understood immediately. "We are issuing a company-wide notice requiring retraining of the guest identification process and behavioral conduct. All Oak Ridge Grand staff will be placed in a reevaluation program, overseen by the regional HR department." Monica tilted her head slightly. "You didn't send me a draft to approve, right?" Carlos quickly intervened. "Number. It's an action plan. We don't want to turn this into a presentation. We want it to be a turning point." The answer made Monica pause for a moment. A long silence passed. The air in the lobby seemed to slow its breathing. Then she spoke, softly but clearly. "You will talk to her." Brent blinked. "Kayla? Yes, of course, with an HR representative present." "I will also talk to her," Monica added. "Not now, after I've rested." Carlos nodded, like someone who had just dodged a blow to the chest. But they all knew that conversation would not be like any training session they had ever conducted. And in the distance, behind the reception desk, Kayla Matthews still sat, not daring to look up. Because she knew, for the first time in her life, she had truly seen power, and it was nothing like the image she had been taught. And as Monica stepped into Suite 1501, all the eyes behind the elevator doors immediately disappeared, leaving her alone in the space she had designed with her own hands, dreamed about, and fought for, a space she could finally call hers. The room was so quiet that she could hear the sound of her shoes tapping on the thick, cream-colored carpet. each step echoing like a reminder of just how far she had come. The room had a faint scent of lemon, not too strong, just enough to evoke the sophistication that Monica had argued fiercely with 3 different suppliers to achieve. It wasn't a scent found in any hotel amenity list, but for her, it was the scent of being acknowledged, the scent of survival after countless sleepless nights only a single mother could truly understand. On the walnut desk placed by the window, the espresso tray was already prepared. 3 pods neatly arranged, a porcelain cup set on a white plate, and a small spoon placed next to a packet of brown sugar. For others, this might be just a luxury convenience, but for Monica, it was a symbol of the days when she couldn't afford instant coffee, when she had to reuse tea bags twice. She slowly walked past the sitting area, where the gray velvet sofa had been chosen by her one January morning, while Layla was still feverish at home. Monica clearly remembered that night. She had sketched the floor plan for this suite on a napkin soaked in orange juice while sitting by her sick child's bedside. Under the yellow light of the emergency room, she calculated the wall space for artwork while stroking her unconscious daughter's forehead. She never sent that sketch to the architect. She kept it, because it was living proof that even during the most exhausting moments of motherhood, she was still building the future. On the table near the window, an already printed thank you card was placed askew. It had a slanted script written in silver ink. "Thank you for staying at Oak Ridge Grand. We cherish your presence." No name, no signature, no indication that the writer knew who she was. A careless card, mass-produced, soulless, and perhaps that hurt more than the rejection at the front desk. Monica picked it up, studied it for a few seconds, then set it back down. She sat on the chair, her hand gently brushing the armrest. The velvet material was cold, soft, but heavy, like how she felt right now, tired, but still resilient. Outside the window, the city of Des Moines at night still breathed through the streetlights and the sound of wind stretching between the buildings. A world that didn't know, or didn't want to know, what had just happened in the lobby of a hotel named after a woman who used to fold clothes for rent to support her child. And then Monica looked at herself in the large mirror next to the minibar. Reflected in her eyes was not the image of a CEO, not a symbol, not a title, but a woman who had carved her name into history with calloused hands and an immeasurable patience. She didn't build the hotel just to make a profit. She built it to prove that being a single mother was not a weakness, but a foundation stronger than any college degree. Every wall in this room had a reason to exist. Every color, every furniture choice, from the wood material to the stitching on the curtains, reflected one single principle she had set for the entire system. Luxury should never take away kindness. And tonight, that system had betrayed that very principle. Monica stood up, walking toward the bed. The white sheets, the 2 large pillows, the amber-orange bedside lamp. Everything was perfect, but she didn't feel relaxed. Not because the room lacked amenities, but because it had been tainted by the misguided gazes just moments earlier. This space, once a symbol of what she had achieved, now made her remember why she started. Not to rest, but to open the door. She didn't need a bedroom. She needed a place where those who had once been looked down upon could walk in with their heads held high, and not have to prove anything. And that's why she was still here. Not to be served, but to check if the heart of this place still beat in the rhythm she had sown from the very first day. Monica sat up straight, her hands lightly clasped in front of her, every movement deliberate. The room, though small, felt thick with tension, as if the air could be cut with a knife, and everyone was waiting to see if the woman would forgive or punish. But Monica did neither. She chose dialogue. She turned to Kayla Matthews, her gaze neither cold nor soft. It was the look of someone who had been forced to hear the wrong answer so many times that it had become second nature, but still hoped this time would be different. "Kayla," Monica said, her voice calm enough to make everyone more tense. "Did I raise my voice at you last night?" Kayla shook her head slightly, her voice barely audible, like the rustling of paper. "No, ma'am." "Did I slam the table, call security, threaten to sue, or record a video to post online?" "No." "Did I threaten anyone in this hotel?" "No, ma'am." Monica nodded lightly, pausing for a moment. Then she asked the question that everyone knew would come, but no one was ready to face. "Then why," she said, keeping her eyes fixed on Kayla, "did you look at me and think I didn't belong here?" The question wasn't aggressive, but it weighed down on Kayla like a stone. Her face flushed red, her eyes dropped, her hands twisted together until her knuckles turned white. I didn't think," Kayla stammered, then stopped, as if she understood that any phrasing would betray her original thought. "That someone like you—" Monica exhaled, not a sigh, but a breath of someone who had grown accustomed to that answer. So accustomed, in fact, that it no longer hurt but never lost its heaviness. She nodded slowly, not in disappointment, not in anger, just in exhaustion. "Tired of answering that question," Monica said, as if speaking to herself. "Everywhere, in every space I walk into, in every decision I make, there's always someone, somewhere, asking whether I truly belong in this position." Linda Sherman, the head of HR, slowly lifted her head, ready to interject, but Monica raised a hand to signal her to stop. This was a conversation between two women, one who had been underestimated, and one who had just learned how painful that truly was. "Do you know," Monica continued, her voice now softer but no less strong, "that I was kicked out of an investment conference just for walking into the VIP lounge without wearing a blazer? I signed a $2.5 million contract the very next week, with the same investor who had turned me away because they thought I was a secretary." Kayla looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "And do you know what the saddest part is?" Monica asked, her brows not furrowed, but her voice pricking at the layers of Kayla's defenses. "I wasn't surprised when you did that. I wasn't shocked, because I've gotten used to it. You don't need to apologize. I didn't come here to make you cry," Monica added. "I came to ask a bigger question, not just for you, but for this entire system." She turned to Linda. "We teach employees how to greet guests, how to smile, how to check documents, but we don't teach them how to look beyond the surface. No one asks them, 'Who is the person you automatically think cannot be the owner?'" Linda nodded slightly, gripping her pen tightly. Monica turned back to Kayla. "You didn't think I belonged here, Kayla, because the image of an owner in your mind didn't include someone like me, right?" Kayla nodded, barely audible, like a sigh. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I really didn't think." "It's because you didn't think. That's the problem," Monica responded without malice. "The most dangerous prejudice is the one that doesn't need to be spoken. It just sits quietly in the mind, and silently decides the fate of others." She took a pen from her briefcase and placed it gently on the table. "We're going to rewrite the training, but before I hand it over to HR, I want you to understand one thing. I don't need people to bow their heads to me. I don't need flowers. I don't need a party. I don't need recognition. I just need people like me, or like my mother, or like the girl who'll work the night shift tonight, to never be looked at with suspicion when they walk through that door." Silence blanketed the room. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was awakening. Monica stood up, gathered her briefcase, her gaze now lighter than before. "The meeting is over," she said. "I'll be back, not as a CEO, but as someone who has been looked at the wrong way, and will not let it continue." And as Monica turned back, her voice softer, deeper, as if speaking to her own past. "You know, Kayla, I used to be a receptionist." Kayla looked up, surprised. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she had never considered the possibility. "I used to stand right where you are, behind the counter, wearing a uniform that didn't fit because the company didn't have my size. I was once mistaken for a janitor, just because I carried a bucket of water to help a colleague clean because she had a bad back. No one asked, they just pointed and told me, 'Don't go this way, guests aren't allowed.'" Kayla opened her mouth, about to say something, but stopped. "I was once called sweetie, girl, honey," Monica continued, "by the men I served coffee to, even though I was the shift supervisor, even though I knew the operation system better than they did." She moved closer to the table, standing in front of Kayla, but not looking down. Instead, looking straight ahead, at eye level, because she wasn't talking to a subordinate. She was talking to a younger version of herself. "I built this place," Monica said, her hand resting lightly on the wooden table, "so that girls like you wouldn't have to hear those words anymore. So they wouldn't be judged by their skin, their hair, or the money in their wallets. So they could stand behind the counter, wear the uniform, and still be seen as a human being, not just a tool." Her voice wasn't shaking, but it was warm. There was something in the way she spoke that seemed to shrink the space around them, leaving only two women, one who had stumbled and one who had fallen hundreds of times. "But last night," Monica continued, "you made me feel invisible. And that, it doesn't make me angry, it makes me hurt." Kayla bit her lower lip, her eyes starting to well up. "Because I used to be you," Monica said, her voice no longer accusatory, but full of empathy. "I know what it's like to smile for 8 hours, even though your feet hurt. I know what it's like to be called the wrong name, to be treated as a server when I was the manager. I know what it's like to be looked at with suspicion just because I didn't look like someone in power." She took a step back, crossing her arms. "And I also know, if no one stops to say this to you today, one day you'll pass it on to someone else." Kayla nodded faintly, her shoulders shaking lightly. "I don't need you to cry," Monica said, gently but firmly. "I don't need an apology, I need you to be aware. And from tomorrow on, I need you to choose to look at others with eyes that aren't clouded by prejudice." She turned to Linda Sherman. "I want Kayla to stay, but she won't return to the front desk until she completes the in-depth retraining program, one-on-one." Linda nodded, taking serious notes. Monica turned back to look at Kayla one last time. "And I want you to become the next mentor for the new staff. Not because you're the best, but because you've just learned the hardest lesson through a real mistake." Kayla couldn't say a word. Her hands trembled, no longer from fear, but from emotion. Monica gave a slight nod and walked out of the meeting room. The door closed behind her, not carrying the echo of power, but that of someone who had given forgiveness not in words, but through responsibility. And behind that door, a young woman was beginning to understand that real change doesn't come from avoiding mistakes, but from knowing how to rise correctly after making them. The door to the meeting room closed behind Monica, but for her, the conversation wasn't really over. It had just begun to shift. What she wanted had never been an apology, a disciplinary report, or a personal lesson. She wanted to change the way an entire system thought. Back in the executive office on the second floor, Not large, not lavish, but the central hub for coordinating operations for the entire Midwest region of Harris and Company hotels. Monica unbuttoned her coat, set her briefcase down on the table, and looked directly at Brent Caldwell and Carlos Mejia, two men who had witnessed her career from its very beginning. No need for small talk, she spoke plainly. We're going to adjust the reception hiring process. Brent froze, about to pour coffee, his hand halting midway. Carlos set his tablet down, waiting. We're not just hiring people who know how to smile or use management software, Monica continued. I want to hire people who have empathy, who have intuition, who have awareness. Carlos nodded slightly, but couldn't hide his hesitation. Do you mean adding EQ assessments to the interviews? No, Monica replied without hesitation. I want every candidate to read at least 3 real reviews from guests who were treated poorly because of their appearance, race, or class. Not a test. They need to face it. They need to think about it. She turned to Brent. And there will be no more training over Zoom. I want department heads to share their real experiences directly. No scripts, no PowerPoints. Brent sighed, as if recalculating the entire training budget. But Monica read that in his eyes and cut him off. If we're still calling ourselves a human-centered hotel, we can't train people like they're robots needing software updates. Carlos chuckled nervously and nodded. Monica walked over to the planning board on the wall. She ripped off an old proposal, crumpled it, and tossed it into the trash. Then she returned to the table, grabbed a pen, and wrote a short line on a piece of blank paper. Empathy is not an asset. It is a hiring criterion. She placed the paper on Linda Sherman's desk, the head of HR. I want this sentence printed on the wall of every training room. Both Brent and Carlos nodded. But then Monica paused, leaned toward them, her voice lowering. One more thing. Starting next quarter, add me to the anonymous guest list. Carlos looked up. You want to go undercover? Monica nodded, slowly but firmly. Not undercover, just anonymous. No advance notice, no emails, no booking with a familiar name. I want to walk into my own hotel and have no one know who I am. Brent furrowed his brow, genuinely worried. You know that's going to cause the entire system to lose temporary control, right? Exactly, Monica replied. I'm not here to watch them perform. I'm here to see how they really live. She paused for a moment, her eyes focused deeply. I want to know how they treat a black woman with a canvas bag, how they treat an elderly man dressed simply, how they treat a child who doesn't speak English. I want to know how they behave when no one is watching. The room fell silent. Brent didn't jot down any notes. Carlos didn't open his laptop. Both understood. This wasn't just another executive meeting. This was a comprehensive redefinition about core values, about beliefs, about honor. Monica turned her chair, sitting down, her gaze directed at the glass window where the first sunlight was shining down on the misty sidewalk. We're not just selling sleep, she said. We're selling the experience of dignity, and if we make guests prove they deserve respect, then we've failed. Brent sat still. Carlos looked down, as if he had just memorized something beyond his managerial role. Send the notice, Monica said firmly, to the whole system. From now on, we're not just checking processes, we're checking hearts. Brent left the office first. Carlos returned to his desk, his face unusually pensive. Monica, after sending the final directive to the system, stood up and left the operations space, feeling lighter than when she had entered. She headed back to Suite 1501 to pack her bags. Her time in Des Moines was running out. The airport shuttle had been rearranged, and Monica knew the busy schedule awaiting her in Chicago later that afternoon. But before leaving, she wanted to stand once more in the space she had once called a dream, to look back and see what she had just accomplished. The room was now quieter. Early morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a warm glow over the crisp white bedsheets. The lemon scent from the diffuser still lingered, as if the effort made by the housekeeping staff to fix a mistake that wasn't theirs hadn't yet faded. Her handbag was neatly placed by the door. The laptop was fully charged, packed up neatly, but there was one thing left unpacked, and it sat quietly on the table by the window. A small folded piece of paper, no logo, no title. Monica tilted her head slightly, opening it. The handwriting was slanted, written in blue pen, not trying to be perfect, but there was something very real, very human about it. Ms. Harris, thank you for your understanding. I will be better. Kayla. Monica sat down on the edge of the bed, still holding the paper. She didn't smile. She wasn't overwhelmed with emotion. It was just a feeling that touched the depth of her heart, the kind of feeling that wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but made a person's heart change. No envelope, no double-C emails to higher-ups. Just a few lines from a girl who had seen herself in the mirror that Monica didn't use to look at herself, but to reflect the truth. And that was what made Monica know. She had done the right thing. Because no speech, no training, no code of conduct could awaken a person from within like the real-life experience had done for Kayla last night. Monica folded the paper back, not pressing it tightly, not folding it into quarters like a piece of evidence. She folded it carefully, like a letter that needed to be carried with her. Because for her, it wasn't just an apology. It was proof that the seed she had planted had started to sprout. As she stepped out of the suite, she paused for a moment, not to look back, but to remember. To remember the feeling of having been rejected in the very place she had built, but also to remember the kindness that had begun to grow from that barren ground. The ground floor was already filling with guests, the sounds of rolling suitcases, clinking cups, and polite greetings. But amidst all these sounds, Monica no longer felt lost. Not because they had recognized her, but because she had recognized herself. The doorman from last night, the one who had looked at her with a blank gaze, was now standing tall, a sincere smile on his face, his voice warm. Safe travels, Miss Harris. Hope to see you again. Monica nodded, not arrogantly. We will meet again. And then she stepped into the waiting black car. The door closed behind her. The sun started to rise higher, its light reflecting off the window like unwritten stories, but stories that were already turning to a new page. In her hand, Kayla's paper was still tightly held, not because she needed to keep a mistake, but because she knew. True change always begins with a very small moment, and often one that is very quiet. On the way to the airport, Monica sat in the back seat, her back lightly resting against the cushion, still holding the small folded piece of paper that Kayla had left behind. She didn't open it again, because she didn't need to. Every word was already settled in her memory, like a melody that didn't need to be replayed, but still echoed in her mind. The city of Des Moines passed slowly outside the window. The low, red-brown rooftops, the sign of a bakery, a small laundromat where Monica briefly saw a woman hanging a sheet on the clothesline. Everything seemed normal, but something in her had changed. Not anger, not the desperate cry for justice. Just one thing she carried with her as she left. Memory. The memory of a woman who once wrapped sandwiches in cheap aluminum foil for her daughter, then rushed to her night shift without even a coin to buy a hot cup of coffee. The memory of someone once called the floor girl, right in front of a business partner, only to sign the contract to purchase the entire building herself later. The memory of a single mother who thought she might always be the shadow behind the reception desk. And then she lit her own shadow. No one gave her respect. No one handed her the keys to the world of power. She had to take it with her bare hands, not through loud resistance, not with a media strike, but through perseverance, in every choice, every step, every moment of being underestimated and still standing tall. The car turned onto the highway, the airport sign appearing ahead. Monica pulled out her phone, typed a short message to Lauren James, her loyal colleague at the regional headquarters. We're not just fixing the system error. We're rewriting how the world sees women like me. Then she opened the Notes app, wrote one more line, not to post, not to share, but to keep as a reminder. You don't need to shout to be heard. Walk as though that door has always belonged to you. Monica looked out the window again. The morning sunlight slanted through the glass, creating a faint light streak on the sleeve of her suit. She raised her hand to shield her eyes and then smiled. Not the smile of a winner, but the smile of someone who had walked through a battle no one else saw, and still stood tall. She thought of the people who would read the report this morning. The receptionists, the housekeepers, the shift managers and supervisors who would sit at the table, review the process, and, for the first time, review themselves. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a movement that didn't come from a powerful black woman, but from a mother once seen as unworthy of even a name on paper. At the airport, Monica stepped out of the car, handing her suitcase to the support staff. The driver bowed his head. "Thank you, Miss Harris. It's an honor." She smiled. "No need for honors. Just remember what happened." Oh. She entered the terminal, her high heels clicking lightly with each step, a reminder to herself and to the world that respect doesn't come from titles. It comes from how you don't give up on yourself, even when others refuse to see you. And if you, the one reading this, have ever been looked down upon, ever been excluded just because you didn't fit the predetermined mold, remember this: you don't need to be invited to step in. If the door won't open, build the entire room, in your own way. If you found this story meaningful, like the video, share it with those who need to be reminded that they are worthy, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next inspiring journeys. Because every story is a light, and this world always needs more light.